Hello, welcome to the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. I'm David Wheatley, and we're here to talk all things leadership. Well, my guest this week is a returner. Commander Yvonne Gray is on a respite from the Royal New Zealand Navy. And we spoke to her in the fall about the challenges of being a female leader in a mostly male world. But one little piece that we left out of that conversation that she's been enthusiastic to come back and share was, what's it like to not only be a female leader in that male environment, what's it like to be a gay female leader in that environment? And so Yvonne talks to us about what it was like, her first experience in the Royal Navy in the UK, when she had to hide that fact, what it was like to be able to then share that, and then what it's been like as a leader to be able to take that as part of her career and support others, and also support folks that are dealing with the fact that there's people around them that are gay. I mean, it's something we should all be very conscious and aware of. And she shares some great tips. So here's Von. Well, Commander Von Gray, welcome back.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. And your whereabouts at the moment on your global travels?
We are in Adelaide, which is the capital city of South Australia, one of the states in Australia.
And you've managed to get a permanent wall behind you for temporarily, and not leaning across the cabin floor of your little your van.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, we're very fortunate to know some people who live in Adelaide, and they've given us their house for 10 days. So we've got proper walls, proper floors, and Wi-Fi.
Woohoo! So the last episode we didn't have a video version of, so I appreciate the fact that we maybe have a video version of this one, so thanks for doing it. And last time we were talking about the challenges of being a woman in a military man's world, which is more becoming less of a military man's world, and I really appreciate you doing that. But this time you offered to share about what it's like to be a openly gay leader in a predominantly hetero and probably quite homophobic world. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Goodness, where to start? Yeah. Where to start? It's interesting to reflect on it. I think where we are now in the world, I think where we are now in 2021 around understanding of diversity and inclusion is very different. And you know, we could talk about how woke everyone is now, or we can talk, but I think we've got to recognize, when we talk about our past, we've got to recognize what the context was at the time. And certainly when I look at my own journey, the context changed over that time. But when I consider where, you know, in the early 90s, I decided to join the Navy. And I think I knew in my heart at that time, I definitely knew in my heart that I was gay, but I was very afraid and probably quite ashamed, because it was something that, you know, in that heteronormative world that we lived in, that wasn't talked about, or if it was talked about in a very derogatory way. And, you know, the words that we used about people who were gay was very derogatory.
I can't imagine you ran into many gay folk in Harrogate growing up.
No, either. And I mean, interestingly, of course, I played cricket, and which was an interesting game, and I love playing cricket. But I think there were gay women in that environment, but nobody talked about it. Right. Nobody acknowledged it. And so all that did was reinforce that shame for me, because I kind of knew that these women were different, but everyone kind of tiptoes around it and doesn't talk about it. So actually it just kind of made it worse. I knew that there were gay women there, but look how badly they had to live their lives because they couldn't even talk about it. So I joined the Navy, which interestingly at the Admiralty interview board, you actually get specifically asked, you know, are you a lesbian? No, never had any of those. No, definitely not. No, it just enabled me to hide it even more deep inside.
I remember that question at my Admiralty interview board, because the guy who asked me it was the stereotype in England in the 80s of a gay guy. Yeah. That whole effeminate kind of look, and asking you in the eye, you ever have any gay thoughts, or you're heterosexual, and all this kind of stuff. And it was fascinating to have that. And I think you're right to look back and contextualize that. We're in a very different place to where we were back then.
Yeah, we absolutely are. And I think perhaps if I was on that journey now, it would definitely be a lot easier. I think that whole environment created some challenges for me that's taken probably this long to really get my head around. So, join the Navy, very heteronormative environment and very male, and therefore the role of females was quite interesting as well, which we talked about last time. And and it was very hidden in terms of what I was, and I had my boyfriends to prove that I wasn't gay, which probably was very unfair to those particular men, and I do apologise for how I behaved in that respect, which is quite interesting. And then I met someone, and that then changed kind of the playing field for me, because now I was having to live this double life. So every conversation was in the third person, everything was hidden. Anytime somebody asked me a question about what was going on in my home life, I had to lie, and living lies is, it's really, really tiring. A friend of mine does some work around diversity, and she does this exercise with the people that she's working with, actually in the mines in Australia. So it's a diversity thing for those people, and she gets one person to volunteer, and she asks them questions around who their partner is, and in these questions they're not allowed to give away the gender of their partner, and so she just fires question after question at them. And of course, if you have to think about what you're saying before you say it, you start to come across as hiding something, which you are. You come across as being nervous, you come across as not being trustworthy. And so you put that person in a work environment or in a leadership environment, and they don't have the same connection with the people around them because they're obviously hiding something. And I think that's something for people now to think about. If you're creating if you're in a very heteronormative environment and you've got somebody in your environment who comes across as hiding something or not quite being there, then perhaps you need to think about them as a person. They might be hiding something because they might be fearful or they might be shameful around what it is that their life is, and that will affect them as a leader.
Let's think about them, and also think about, are you creating an environment that makes it easy for people to be honest and open, or are you creating an environment that's, because yours back in the 90s in the Navy, you could not be gay officially.
No,
and so
I would lose my job.
Yeah, the environment was such that you had to hide that. And what you're talking about is not only think about what that person may be going through, but also think about, are you creating an environment that makes it feel open and welcoming, and that that's something that people could be honest about.
Yeah, and what does that environment look like? And I think sometimes we talk a little bit about rainbow washing. Oh, it's Pride Week, so therefore let's get the rainbow lanyards out. Right, Pride Week's finished. Oh, let's put all of that away again. But don't underestimate the importance of, say, a leader wearing that rainbow lanyard all year round, or that pin on their tie all year round, or having an inclusive space all year round, rather than just that 1 week of Pride. And I think if you are gay or trans or questioning or intersex and all of the other the letters that are so important in the LGBTQ environment, if you are any of those things, to see something in your workplace, your environment that speaks to you, speaks volumes. So I think for leaders, don't underestimate the importance of that inclusive and understanding of the diverse nature of your workforce, because actually, if somebody feels that they're part of it, they'll probably give a little bit more.
Right. Some of the large companies over here are now getting wise to starting affinity groups. And so, for a while there were female groups that were about female leaders, but there's definitely a LGBT and allies group. And one of the things that's cool about that is the number of people who want to be part of that to make it more welcome and open and things like that. And that's one of the reasons why I keep my preferred pronouns on all of my messaging is because someone shared with me, it's not about me, it's about making that normative so that the person who has different ones doesn't feel awkward about putting theirs out.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's that, I hate to use the word, but it's the normalization of it,
Yeah.
isn't it, really? I mean, I watched a good TED talk the other day. A woman who's involved in diversity is about to go and work for the UN, but she was saying that as a diversity and inclusion manager, she wants to actually get to the point where she hasn't got a job anymore.
Yeah.
Because it just is, you know,
Yep.
that anybody in any workplace is comfortable with who they are, everyone else is comfortable with who they are, and so you don't need to be specific about it. But I think that will take quite a lot of time. But I think that if companies work towards it, then they've got to they should recognize that there is strength in that. There is strength in recognizing that not everyone is the same.
Yeah. And so you're in the British Navy. You're realizing or recognizing that you're living this lie and managing this situation, and this is triggered a little bit by finding someone.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, my first girlfriend then went off with someone else after I'd gone to sea, so that was a good learning experience as well, disappearing off to sea and finding that you haven't got a girlfriend anymore. So, and of course, going through that, you know, think about your first heartbreak, real heartbreak, and then think about who you were able to talk to about it. Yeah. And share that with, because that helps, doesn't it? And then think about being in an environment where you can't talk to anybody. I couldn't talk to anybody about that. I mean, I remember talking to a junior sailor and talking to him about the fact that my partner had left me, and it was all sort of in the third person. I mean, I think he definitely knew, actually, and he was really good, because he listened to me without judgment and without telling the authorities, which is bizarre to think, but he didn't dog me in, as it were. And that was hard going. So again, if somebody's living and is in fear of telling people about what their life is at the moment, then they become less, both as a leader and as a team player. So that was an interesting learning experience for me, I think, and I think it didn't help me progress in terms of being out, but it certainly, it built that resilience, and it helped me in that respect, I think. And so I then got someone else, and as it were, and still living that life was really difficult. And then in 2000, the rules changed. Right. And so the rules were that you could now be out, you could be gay, and you weren't going to lose your life. And I was the executive officer, so I was the second in command of a ship at that time. And I remember the CO called me, the commanding officer called me into his cabin, which is his office on board where he lived, and said he had the official signal that had come from the Admiralty, that this rule was changing. We hadn't had a heads up about it prior to that. And he said, right, we've got a challenge, we've got a problem on our hands, because they've just changed the rules, and I don't think the sailors are going to be very happy about this. And it was an all-male ship as well, so I was the only female on board. I was the second in command, the only female. And he said, right, you're going to have to go and tell the sailors about this. Right. And part of me was thinking, oh God, how am I going to handle this? And then the other part of me was going, yippee, yeah. Finally, and that kind of like a relief. And I actually came out to my boss at that time and said, this is really quite important for me, because I am gay. And he said, well, I kind of knew that, but
yeah, we don't talk about it.
Yeah, and then we can talk about it. And in fact, actually, not that long after, me and my then girlfriend got invited to his house for dinner, along with another guy from the ship and his wife. And that was the first time in that kind of work environment that I was able to be who I was with my partner. Right. Something that, I guess you and your wife have always had, that you could be invited as a couple, that you didn't have to hide away. And so to be suddenly part of that club was just awesome, was amazing. And I remember thinking at the time, God, that's so forward thinking of him. Well, it shouldn't have been, should it?
So it's interesting at that time, because was there a part of you that said, should I be cautious about this because maybe they'll change their mind, the next government, or something like that?
There was a little bit of that. I mean, interestingly, the reason why it changed was because a group of people who had been in the Navy had been kicked out of the Navy in a quite shameful way. I mean, the way that they used to kick people out was really, really quite horrible. And they had gone to the European Court of Human Rights. One of the reasons why I think it's so important that Britain remained within Europe. But anyway, and it was that forced the change in the legislation. So I don't think I was fearful that it would change, but I was fearful that of still being out. You know, I think when you've got that much internalized homophobia in yourself, when you've got that much shame around being gay and not being able to talk about it out loud, that takes a while. You know, rules can change, but it still takes quite a while for a person to change, or the culture of an organization to change. You know, the rules change, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the derogatory language that is used around gay people changes.
Well, even the response of your captain's kind of interesting, isn't it? That if you're saying this is kind of good because, by the way, I'm gay, and each of the rest, yeah, we knew that, and yet no point had a conversation ever been able to be had prior because of both the technicalities of that and the discomfort of even broaching that subject.
Yeah, I think so. And then, of course, think about how that would make me feel. He's my boss. He's supposed to be helping me out. And yet I can't talk to him about something, and he won't talk to me about something.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's indicative of that particular organization, but not about 5 years later, I remember I was going to a new posting and I was working for a Commodore. So that's quite high. That's a sort of Brigadier General equivalent.
Nice translation.
Pardon?
Nice translation on the fly there.
Just like that. And I haven't lost it. I remember at my joining interview with him, he talked to me about his family, and he talked to me about how he was a Christian, and he talked to me how when he was younger, he and his wife had a child, and the child had died, and how important it was to him, and how it really made him approach life in a way because of this thing that had happened to him. And that was probably the first time in my naval career that somebody higher than me, somebody who was a leader for me, talked to me about their drivers. In terms of his drivers was his family life. Nobody had ever had that conversation with me before. And it was really enlightening, because it made me understand that actually, as a leader, I should be able to have that conversation as well. I should be able to talk to someone about what my why was. You talk about Simon Sinek's, you know, what's your why? Yeah. Actually, that importance of that home life and who my wife is, it was a light bulb moment for me. And I think that was in 2005. So that was 5 years after the rules had changed. And that was when I finally understood and was able to talk about who I was across the whole spectrum. I mean, I'm gay, but it's not the only thing about me.
Yeah.
But it's
you
pretty.
Could be authentic.
I definitely could be authentic. Yeah. It's and this guy, Commodore Richards, painted that picture for me. He painted a picture of what it was to be authentic in his leadership, because of he was able to speak about the whole piece. And that was really good for me, because it allowed me, it gave me the permission to also be like that. Because if this Commodore could do it, then I could do it as well. And I think from that point on, I've always been open about who I am, and about, so Sharon is my wife, and about Sharon and our life together. And I think I would like to think that I set an example to the people that worked for me in terms of that openness.
Right. So if I and I appreciate that, if I go back to, you've spent this time in the Navy being somewhat inauthentic, And so that turmoil was a lot internal because you're having to manage this situation all on your own. And then one day happens and they flip the rules, and now you don't have to manage that anymore, but you probably have to manage the external reaction to your authenticity.
Yeah, because how many times do you want to come out?
I don't know.
Well, and that's what's interesting. You know, you talk to anyone from sort of my part of the community, and you have to choose to come out every time, almost every time you have a conversation with anybody,
Yeah.
whether the workplace or not. You know, if I went to a meeting and you know, these people in this meeting I might never meet again, but one of them says to me, "Oh, so what does your husband do?" At that point, do I out myself and say, "Oh, you know, my wife is a police driving instructor," or do I say nothing, or do I dodge the question? You know, even when it was allowed, do I make, and this is interesting, do I make that person feel uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Now that I shouldn't be thinking it like that, but I think I did. You know, do I make someone else feel uncomfortable by coming out, or do I just be who I am, and actually it's their problem rather than my problem? So
But that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because remember where I was framing it, it's what you went from all the inner turmoil and you were dealing with it. Then you could be open and it was everybody else's issue. But even then, it was an inner conflict as to whether you put this on other people or not.
that's it. And you talk to anyone from who is gay or trans, you know, or any of the other things, that it's a choice every time you have a conversation. And so I think that's perhaps something for leaders to be aware of, is that the importance of that open environment, such that people can have those open and honest conversations, because it's stressful. It's stressful thinking, are you going to react badly if I tell you that I'm gay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure you don't have to have that conversation whenever you talk about your wife.
I was just thinking, I'm yet to come out as hetero to anybody. So I have managed to get through 55 years without having to do that. And you know, that's just a privilege in this society. And what you're talking about is somebody maybe having to do that every time they have a social conversation.
Indeed. And I think, you know, we're hearing a lot at the moment of some people in the world feeling that the woke society has gone a little bit too far, and, you know, this political correctness gone mad. Actually, what we're talking about is just have some good manners and just be aware that not everyone has got the ease of life that you have. So perhaps just acknowledge that the reason why people are rising up and talking is because actually where they are, where they're sat, and what they see is not the same as you.
Yeah.
And actually, that's just good manners.
And it's the manners of being aware enough to change your language. I mean, one of the things I know I'm trying to build into mine is referring to significant other rather than any other. You know, I may say wife because I've been married to a fine woman for 30 years now. But if you say significant other, it leaves it open for the breadth of, you know, married, not hetero, homo, whatever there may be in there.
And that you talked about the pronouns before. The use of the pronoun they works so well.
Yeah. It goes apart from in Microsoft Word.
Well, indeed, you know, and the grammar pedants amongst us, you know, still find it difficult. But really, it doesn't hurt, does it?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, to change your language. I mean, I remember when I first joined the Navy, and for a long time in the Royal Navy, all of the books of reference, so where you go to get the rules or the guidelines, always used the pronoun his or he.
Yep.
So a commanding officer was always a him. But then we introduced a subnote. When we use the word he, we are of course referring to he and she. But no, you're not.
Yeah.
And you know, and certainly as a junior officer, I knew that I was never going to be a commanding officer because they're always he's, and I'm not a he.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, if we change his or her, or his and her sometimes, to they, that works really well.
Yeah.
And it's so minor. And that's where I think, you know, some certainly some people I know, oh, this is ridiculous. Fancy having to change to they. It's not ridiculous. It's no more ridiculous than saying he is referring to both women and men. No, it's not. Otherwise, we could change everything to she. How would you feel if we changed it all to she? Now you're being ridiculous. So I think that pronoun is so minor, and yet for some people it is so important. And I think that's maybe it, is be aware that all of those little things, there's a cumulative effect which creates acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I love the way you framed it. It's just be respectful of people, and that respectful is treat people how they would like you to treat them. In some ways, it's basic golden rule stuff. So, there's a lot of resources, and I'm not going to dive into the resources that are available for people who are struggling with coming out and things like that. The essence of this podcast is trying to give leaders practical ideas. And what advice would you give a leader that's maybe trying to create the environment to make it more friendly, or is recognizing some of his or her shortcomings, their shortcomings in recognizing this environment? What kind of things would you suggest they could build into their work, other than some of the ones we suggested, like using they?
I think just to build up your awareness of who else is in the world. So whether that's listening to some podcasts. I mean, obviously this leadership one's a really good one, but there's some other great podcasts out there. There's a podcast called Homo Sapiens. It's hosted by Chris Sweeney and Alan Cumming, the actor. Mm-hmm. Chris Sweeney's a director, and they talk of a range of subjects, and in that LGBTQI plus community, and I think it's really good resource for straight people to listen to, cis straight people to listen to, because actually it gives you a point of view that perhaps you've not considered before. And I have learned quite a lot about the trans community by listening to that and understanding where they're coming from, because just because I'm part of the LGBTQI community doesn't mean I necessarily have affinity or understand the other people in that. And I've found it important to understand what it is that they're going through, because it's not the same as what I go through. Some similarities, but different. So I think as a leader, perhaps to reach out to some of those resources where you might find out about things that are different to you is important. There's plenty of books on this subject. As I say, there's podcasts available, and perhaps just getting around and talking to your workforce about what it is that they need. And that listening ear, to actually hear what your people are saying, actually probably would be most beneficial. Right. Because until you understand who is in your workforce, how can you possibly make sure that you're giving them what they need?
So you're saying the same thing as we're hearing a lot over here at the moment, in particular about race, is that the more you understand about what's gone on and the history and everything else, the easier it is for you to approach and deal with and realize the situation. And you're saying the same thing. The more you understand about what people have gone through historically, and this goes back thousands and thousands of years, that we've had, in some cases openly, in some cases not, the more they understand about that, the better. And even down to, we had our names on our list for a while now with the local LGBT organization, that to be stand-in parents. And it's something I'd never thought of in my life before, because I've always had parents who would show up at events that I needed them to show up at. And there's a challenge with especially teenage kids that come out and then get rejected, that they have nobody at all the events that everybody else has parents at.
Yeah.
And that thing of, holy cow, and all it would take is for me to go there and applaud. And that would fill a gap and a void, not completely, but fill a little bit of a void for these people. Then we can do that. Yeah,
exactly. And I think the real challenges that the gay community, and I use that specifically, the gay community went through in the 80s and 90s, is kind of echoed by what the trans community is going through now. And so I think to be an ally of the trans community, and of that 12-year-old kid who really is questioning who they are, for somebody to listen to that person, somebody, as you say, go and clap them on at the sidelines of the footy, you know, actually that probably is quite is valuable, is incredibly valuable. And so I think for that leader to understand what's going on, to not assume, don't assume that you understand what's going on. Go and have that conversation with somebody. You know, assumption is the mother of it, you know, we know. So, you know, go and have the conversation.
There's a great movie that is based in around the miners' strike in the UK in the 80s called Pride over here. And that's another one that is good for showing how when you get to know each other, it's amazing how people can come together because we are 90%, 99% alike, and we get focused on these silly little differences that are important to recognize, but we shouldn't be holding us up.
No, yeah, exactly. As I said, you know, I'm a gay woman, but I'm not just a gay woman. I don't want that to define me. I'm far more than that. But it is still a fundamental part of me, and so I need to be able to talk about it. And so I think finally I can.
And I think it's great that you are, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to share your story, and because I think that's the way that we support other people sharing their story. And I just want to finish with one quick question. What advice would you give let me think back and do the calculation, about the 24, 25-year-old you that was struggling with this inner turmoil about their authenticity?
It's an interesting one. There's a part of me that would say to her, don't join the Navy. don't join an organization that makes you hide who you are. I think there is, and that would change my life completely. So.
We were talking about that earlier, different directions.
Yeah.
And if they were in the Navy because that was you joined the Navy because you had a choice and that was a passion or interest that you suddenly found and thought, hey, let's go do it. And if you're in there and you're still in turmoil, what advice would you give them?
I think, probably it gets better. You know, I think that would just provide some hope to her, I think.
Cool. And it gets better, and you can now join the Navy because at least in most of the world, it's okay to be that way, but in some of the world, it still isn't.
Well, that's the thing, and you know, and I think those battles are not yet won. But every time I talked about rainbow washing and how we mustn't just pay lip service to it, but at the same time, if there's a Pride March, when we had Pride March in Wellington, in the capital of New Zealand, and all of the senior leadership from the New Zealand Defence Force were there in their uniform, marching alongside us. That's pretty powerful.
That's a big message. Yeah,
it's powerful to the people within the organisation, but actually, it's a message. It is a message to other countries that look, the world hasn't fallen down around our ears just because we've accepted this group of people. And all of those messages are really important, I think, to those countries perhaps who have not yet recognised the importance of their diverse population.
Which is a call out to the allies to stand up and be allies.
Absolutely.
Well. Cool. Hey, Vaughn, thanks once again for spending some time across 16-hour gap or whatever we're on now and getting up early to do this and have this chat with me. Have a great rest of the day, but thank you for sharing your story.
No worries at all. Great to have a chat.
Yeah, good to see you. Take care. Well, that was Vaughn Gray, and wonderful to see her this time. For those that are regular followers, you remember that we didn't have video last time, so it was great to see her, and some great points about the challenges of her journey and her leadership journey, and also what we could all be more conscious of as we lead and supervise and guide others in our world to be more open and accepting of wherever people are at. So I really appreciate Vaughn taking the time to do that. As you'll hear in the outro shortly, there's a chapter 10 of What Great Teams Do Great is now completed. And this is the problem when you write a book and then within 12 months, you've written 2 extra chapters for the book. If you've got What Great Teams Do Great, then thank you very much. It's back there on the shelf. If you haven't, then please go out and support the podcast by purchasing it. And as a gift to you, Chapter 9 is available from the Humanergy.com website. And that is a supplement on What Great Teams Do Great, Race and Power that we had some help in writing last summer. And then just recently, we've finished Chapter 10, which is all about what great teams do great in a virtual world. And if you want to send me a note, I'll gladly send you a copy of that. It's PDF form, so we'll absolutely shoot it out to you. But send me a note, david@humanergy.com. We'll see what we can do to get that to you. Thanks very much. This has been Humanergy Leadership Podcast. You've been listening to the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. I'm David Wheatley. And we're brought to you by the book, What Great Teams Do Great, available now at all good bookstores. Thanks to Brian Spencer and Finkel for the music. Please share any feedback and suggestions. I'm available through humanergy.com. And go to iTunes, like, subscribe, and leave us a review so that other people can find us. In the meantime, until next time we meet, stay healthy.